What's up, friends? Welcome to the Sunday pre-call. Anyway, thanks for being here. So I know we're diving into the 4 agreements, and what I really wanted to focus on is diving deep into the book this time. So that's what each of the pre-calls will kind of be about, is part of the book. So right now, chapter 1, or whatever you want to call it, is the dream of the planet and domestication. And I think there's some really interesting points here, and I want to point out where we dig in deeper and we talk about them on our own, and where we're already discussing a lot of these topics. So it's further awareness, it's further reinforcement of all these concepts that we're already talking about and starting to put on ourselves and starting to adjust the way that we have awareness. So a lot of this book, it's not a guidebook. This book is a book of awareness. It's being able to figure out like where all your roots come from, where all your preconceived ideas, where all your mean voice, where all the judgment, where all of this stems from. And once you have awareness of it and you can separate who you are from those things, you can create whatever you want. But as long as you believe those things are actually part of your identity and who you are, you're not going to be able to let go of them. You're going to continue to drag them with you and have those things become limiting factors. So these are all the perceived rules, beliefs, expectations that we're born into and conditioned by, right? So what we talk about is our base self. And this is that. This is building that base self. This is all the stuff that you did not choose, that you show up in an environment and there are already beliefs and rules and everything from that community and that culture that are in place. The same way you didn't choose a language to speak, right? You didn't choose your name. These things are already decided for us and we fall in line. Even with names, right? Like we learned from that and the culture we're in what would be an appropriate name. Like we can't name our kid buttfuck, right? Like that's not a good move. But it's just still a combination of sounds. There is an agreement based on the culture we have that chooses Matthew or James over things like Frankenstein. So these are culturally accepted beliefs that are put in place that we're born into. And it's just having the awareness of that, right? Like that's what creates all the ideas of our base self, is all of these things that we are exposed to and conditioned by growing up. And that dream of the planet is that the planet has one dream, right? That society is going to follow these rules to do a certain thing and humans are here for a reason. And those beliefs kind of stem from around the planet, right? Like we end up, everyone's at this point got a lot of the same ideas about right, wrong, rules, and what's best and what life should look like for happiness, success, and all these other things. But the more we are influenced by that, the more we're conditioned by it. And that conditioning is what creates the best self and what programs it. Not all of these things are a negative, but they are all shaped during this time. Now, the negative or positive behind that has more to do with our perception of it and if we leaned into it or leaned away from it, right? Like if religion was overbearing or any of these things that we were around, we tended to lean away from it, which creates a belief which drives a lot of angsty teenagers toward atheism when they really don't understand what they're talking about. I made that move myself. And the older I've gotten and realized that those preconceived notions about religion or anything else were based on that, and I now have the option to educate myself differently. That these underlying things, rules and beliefs and expectations we have, they are not us in our genetics. They're not inherently important things. They are a collective idea of what's important from one way or another. The second thing he talks about is domestication. And I love this chapter, right? Because what he talks about is we essentially domesticate people and get them to kind of fall in line with the rules and the way that we would like them to behave, with the same way we train our pets. We teach kids and domesticate kids throughout the course of their life the same way we train pets. It's through punishment and reward. It is saying a good boy does this, a bad boy does this, a good girl does this, a bad girl does this. It's these little things that add up over time and continually start shaping our own ideas of what good and bad are. And that we're looking for validation from someone above us to tell us that we are doing good and staying on path. So again, this is just an awareness of where that feeling is stemming from. This isn't something you created, but this is something that gets pre-installed with the base self. And so how your own feelings of self-worth, self-confidence, they all stem from this time of domestication and how the people above you, your parents or whoever was around to raise you, chose. And also realizing that they're on the same plan, right? Like they're not aware that that's what they're doing. They're doing what was done to them with some shift and shape to it. And so that's what allows society end up with a pretty similar idea of what's right and wrong. People fall in line, they go to school, they get married, they do that, right? Like that's what the domestication process has put us in line to do, is it continues to build on that. And during the domestication process, this is where all of our beliefs and perceptions are formed. This is where the perceptions are formed, and this is really important. This is what we talk about, right? The perception is really critical. And that perception has all of those other filters in front of it and not just the reality that you're dealing with, right? So you may believe something is scary or something makes you feel uncomfortable when it isn't a threat at all. This is your perception of it, right? Your perception is that thing looks scary, that thing looks gross, that thing has a filter that you've put on it that came from the domestication process of what you were raised around, what were you taught is acceptable in your house, the way to behave, the way to speak to other people, what type of information to view, etc. What's obscene, what's not obscene, what is allowed to be talked about, what does your ideas of intimacy and everything else get shaped around, comes through this domestication process. That's what builds us. Having an awareness of that separates us from being able to see that we are not necessarily those things. They were not, I don't want to say forced, right? Because that creates this malicious intent, and there's not always malicious intent behind this. This isn't done with just trying to shape you into being whatever. This is just how we work, and this is how psychologically we build up barriers and we do everything else. So that's what we just want the awareness of, is why our mindset does what it does. Why does it beat us up? Why does it shitty? And we talk about that in the next part of it, where he talks about the judge, the victim, and the belief system. This is the internalization of all the rules and beliefs that we created during domestication and during the dream of the planet, all combined together to be on us, right? And so it also creates us becoming our own judge and becoming our own victim. And so it's really tough when we have to govern ourselves if we're doing that, especially if we're doing it based on rules that don't necessarily align with us, because we're constantly trying to get approval from this other thing. And so the judge, that part of ourself, is that voice, right? That's constantly evaluating, the people you're around. It's the one that stays in comparison, and it's comparing and judging ourselves against other people, what we think is supposed to be held by society standards, how we are supposed to feel. It's all this expectation of what we think we should be at, built on an expectation, right? That we're waiting for this thing to come because we've done the other thing, and therefore all the judge's ideas are filtered through that lens that got built through domestication and through understanding the societal dream of the planet, right? Our base self. The victim is how we punish ourselves and other people in our lives for not matching up to those standards. And we all do it. We all hold that line, and we all beat ourselves up way more than we'd ever allow anyone else. And through that, that's something we have to take aware of and realize that that's a boundary. That in the same level that we can talk to ourselves is where we will limit how other people treat us. Because if people talk to you a little bit nicer than you talk to yourself, you'll tolerate it. It's acceptable. You're used to it. It doesn't offend you. But if people talk to you a little worse than you would tolerate from yourself, they're typically gone. So understand wherever you decide to set that boundary will shape the people that you're surrounded by and ultimately shape who you're going to be. Because the people that we surround ourselves with shape us in the same way that we can look back at the domestication process, that we were shaped by the people around us there, shaped by the societal dream of the planet, which is our base self. Creating our best self is being able to choose all those things. It's being able to choose the people we're around and choose the standards that we hold ourselves to, and take and follow up that with action to build the confidence and understanding that this is who we are. The fourth part is that need for approval. We've all been there, and we spend tons of time in it. Everyone can get better at it, get worse at it, but the truth is we're all kind of pre-wired to want it. Just knowing that that is there and it's not some fuck up. It's not a bug, like it's a feature. We want to be valued in a community. We want to be part of something. The problem is if you're trying to be valued in a group of people that don't align with your purpose, who you want to be and the goals you want to reach, it's time for you to shift from that base community that you were established with to one that resonates with you. That's finding people on the same wavelength and finding people that are interested in the same things you're interested in. This is that idea, like that fear, right, is what, that need for approval. So that need for approval shapes our expectations. And that need for approval is all of these things we allow that start shaping the decisions we make, right? Like how we are expected to be perceived will change the way that we express ourselves. And I don't mean that physically in the way we dress, but yes, we can see where there's limitations based on what you would decide to do created by these other things and this need for approval. Very few people have full level of fuck-its, and people that do are oftentimes trying to rub people the wrong way. They're still looking for some type of, if they're not gonna get approval and they've leaned into just being annoying, then that's the attention they're looking for. They're still vying for attention. It's still, they've shifted attention to being a positive thing, whether good or bad. But that's all built most likely during the domestication process or anything else. That if I wasn't getting attention for falling in line, when I stepped out of line, I got attention. Therefore, now I step out of line a lot to get attention, right? Like it gets shaped that way. And for me, what we talk about in this group, right, that need for approval, the only approval I want is mine. That's the one I'm focused on. That's where we talk about that no one else gets a vote. And when you have that need of approval, these are all things you're giving a vote to. The type of car you drive, the place you live, the people you're around, whatever the societal bullshit is that you're giving your energy to is getting a vote in your life. And you don't need approval for that. You don't need fucking permission to chase your dreams. You need accountability, you need consistency, and you need to give a fuck. You need to have intention behind your actions every day. That's what it takes. It's not the approval or permission you need to others. At some point, you gotta take action and start making decisions for you. Number 5 is dreaming. Dreaming is our perception of reality, and we talk about this a lot, right? So Don Miguel Ruiz talks about in the book that we're always dreaming, whether we're awake or we're asleep. The difference is when we're awake, our perception of reality, the dream, that's what he's defining dream as, is right? Just perception of reality, the way we see the world. That when we're awake, it's driven by a linear narrative for the most part, and we perceive things, of course, through the course of the day that way. But at night, and when we dream, it isn't necessarily linear, but it's still our perception. And so what he's talking about there is based on our domestication, and based on the judge, and based on the society we grew up in, and that need for approval. That shapes our perception of the reality we're in. If we're judging the people we're around, if we're looking for this need of approval, if we're thinking this equals success, but this doesn't, or this is acceptable and this isn't, based on other rules than for ourselves, that perception of things, of right and wrong, good and bad, should and shouldn't, is changing your reality. And so the more that you're in control of how you allow your perceptions to come through, you get to influence the reality you're in. Therefore, if your perception is that things are always abundance and the grass is always green, you live in abundance. But if everyone's out to fucking get you, I know that they will be. Right? That's what you're looking for. That's where your energy's going. Your perception of life is that everyone's on the attack for you. The reality that you live in will be one of fear and chaos. And number 6, Book of Law. This is the set of rules that we are subconsciously developed during domestication. Like all of those things subconsciously become who we are. And these are the rules set by life about what work you should do, what looks like success, what do relationships look like, thoughts on intimacy, divorce, money, how moving to another country, what language to speak, what poverty is, what racism is, what all of these things and triggers are these rules that are set in us and built as beliefs. And all of these things end up governing the dream that we're living. Right? They're governing our reality. They're governing our perception. And so whatever, they also a lot of times will limit what we believe is possible in our dream and limit our perceptions and then limit what we will be willing to try. And this is the reality, to know that there are no fucking rules and you can do whatever you want. There are consequences for all of your actions, but nothing is inherently the right way. You are not allowed to have your pursuit be more important than someone else's. You cannot step in the way of someone else pursuing their greatness just to help yours. No fucking way. Outside of that, I don't believe there's any rules for operating in life. Chase what you're into, give it all your fucking energy, and do it with purpose and intention. And I want to help people find whatever makes that and their definition of success and failure real. What does your definition of being the best version of you look like? Because if you don't know it, we can't move toward it. We don't have awareness of it. We don't have an idea of it. We have to create that perception before we can have the reality. All right, I hope you guys enjoy the call. I look forward to chatting about this Sunday live with you guys, but we're going to stay in this arena, is on the dream of society. What is that? Society's dream? The dream of the planet and domestication. See you guys in the call.